The original Indiana Jones trilogy is everything Hollywood dreams about, an original IP that's bursting with creativity and movie magic, makes a bunch of money at the box office, and becomes a long-lasting classic. This was Spielberg and Lucas firing at all cylinders. Try as Mangold might, and I do respect him as a director, he just cannot compare with one of the greatest directors in history in his prime. Mangold's attempts to replicate Spielberg's style in Dial of Destiny leads to a complete misunderstanding of the appeal of this franchise and a joyless film that may be one of the most depressing times at theaters I've had in a long time. The movie opens strong, with the best part of the film following a de-aged Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones tries to steal back the Spear of Destiny from the Nazis. It may be kind of overly CGI heavy, and the de-aging can be hit or miss, especially when it sort of lingers on his digital face, but it recaptures that sense of fun adventure that we all remember from the first three films. Unfortunately, we then do have to jump to modern day, where Indiana is now kind of this old, bitter, angry man who just kind of yells at kids to get off his lawn. He's roped into another adventure when his goddaughter, Helena, steals half of the Dial of Destiny while being pursued by a group of Nazis. Indiana must again don the whip and fedora in order to race to find all the pieces of the dial in order to unlock the secrets to time itself. As I said, you can really feel Spielberg missing from the director's chair as someone who really got the heart of this character's appeal. The most damning part of Dial of Destiny is that the film forgets that it's supposed to be this fun adventure franchise. The original Indiana Jones was inspired in part by James Bond, but also by 1914's action serials. They were meant to sweep you up into this journey into the unknown with a charismatic hero, a franchise built on well-planned and choreographed action set pieces with real-world practical effects. Even at its worst, Crystal Skull even remembered this. So what are we getting instead? Well, instead we have this sluggishly paced movie that lacks the sense of playfulness of the other chapters. Gone is that tongue-in-cheek vibe where the hero has to get out of trouble sometimes by skill, sometimes by dumb luck, and other times by the hand of God. Literally. But here, action scenes and set pieces are just drenched in CGI and lack creativity while running far too long, lacking that snappy pacing and sense of escalating danger. The movie goes for quantity over quality, but more action doesn't always mean better action. And with exception to the third act, there really isn't anything standout or memorable in these set pieces. As for Indiana Jones himself, he's been transformed, like most legacy characters, into this fragile, disillusioned old man in the vein of, like Luke Skywalker. It seems that Hollywood only seems to know how to write their older characters as grumpy, cynic curmudgeons. Why can't we have the older Indiana Jones longing for his glory days, just of his old adventures, before being swept up for one last ride? Where's the sense of this character's cheeky temper, comedy, or wiry grin? The sense that, despite all the hardships and trials, that this is what he lives for. In Dial of Destiny, the character is basically unrecognizable as this bitter figure who yells at his neighbors for playing music too loud, has lost motivation in life, everyone he knows has kind of left him or is dead, and whenever he gets into trouble, he has to yell for help or call for the police like an old lady clutching her handbag. Is this really what we wanted to see? This is not the Indiana Jones we know, and is borderline just a completely different person, and without that iconic costume, I don't think anyone would even be able to recognize him. Even Crystal Skull managed to bring to life a more elderly version of the character while keeping his core appeal intact. He felt like that old character we knew. I don't know who this is supposed to be, and it's just kind of sad and depressing to watch him in this state. And it's not like he's some hard character to recapture. Indiana Jones isn't particularly deep when we really get down to it, and that's okay. He was never meant to be. He's at his best as a heroic and charismatic action star that the audience doesn't really know much about outside of him just being a professor and archaeologist. He was created as a male power fantasy in the vein of, or perhaps more accurately in replacement of, James Bond, seeing as Spielberg was not able to use the character and couldn't get the rights to actually make his own James Bond movie. He was a hero that swept the audience off their feet with swashbuckling daredevil feats and pure hot-blooded tenacity. That's not to say you can't reinvent new angles on characters. Clint Eastwood excelled at taking his youthful Western archetypes and envisioning how they would kind of come into older age. His approach to action evolved while keeping his finger on the pulse of why those archetypes were so popular in the first place. Dial of Destiny doesn't really understand this. An 80-year-old Indiana should not be doing the same thing as his 40-year-old counterpart, but he should still have that same spirit. Less car chases and fisticuffs, and more old dog new tricks. What we have here is a movie that makes him old and grumpy in his personality, but in his action scenes attempts to skirt around the fact that he's in his senior years. And that's not to say that Ford is putting in some sort of half-assed or bad performance. He is giving it his all despite misplaced intentions, with a particularly good scene where he has to discuss his son. Other characters are pretty minimal. John Rhys Davies Salah stops in for a short time, and it is a welcome return, but really isn't involved in much of the story. The newcomers can be a mixed bag. Mads Mikkelsen brings his A-game as always, and is a pro at playing villains, and makes the most out of some pretty light character writing. Though he does have some unintentionally comedic moments, like somehow surviving being clotheslined off a high-speed train, or tracking the main characters with these magic binoculars that can predict exactly where the next scene's going to take place. The big new name in the franchise now is Fleabag's Phoebe Waller-Bridge, as Indy's goddaughter Helena Shaw, a character who has really just, two modes: smug and insufferably smug. She is far from a likable character, as she constantly puts down her godfather and acts selfishly, often wearing this dumb grin even when Indy is crying over his friends being slaughtered right in front of his eyes. It's not exactly the most endearing quality. She is a character who also has a lot of Indiana Jones's traits, down to being a pseudo-archaeologist in her own right, just as good at solving riddles, a linguist, and an action hero. She was clearly being set up as this potential character to continue the franchise, but I can only imagine those plans were abandoned when it was revealed how unlikable she was. And speaking of that third act, and I won't get into specific spoilers, the movie was reported to have either completely reshot its last act or had multiple endings, and I'm actually inclined to believe it. Something was drastically changed either in the filming, the editing, or the late-stage scripting, because the third act abandons most of that really reserved tone that the rest of the film has for this sort of Doctor Who lunacy complete with bad CGI. And this all feels completely at odds with everything else before it, with head-scratching plot holes, characters that are kind of on the edge of dying and just don't, and a resolution that feels kind of like they don't know how to end it, so they just lazily smash cut to black. It seems something here was heavily altered in a case of studio interference. But again, that's just speculation. I can't know for sure. And I can't entirely blame James Mangold either. He seems like he got shuffled into a gun-for-hire role, trying to find a happy medium between his older Indiana Jones films and a character conclusion in the vein of, say, his own Logan. But this shouldn't have been anything like Logan, in my opinion. He avoids going too far like something like Crystal Skull did at places, which some people will appreciate, but it resulted in a much more reserved, safe, and dry tone. Compare that with the original trilogy, which was just bursting with creativity in every set piece, scene, and location. The fifth film is just this creative desert that feels built by corporate ghouls who just want the movie to work its way through, every little checkbox of things people associate with the property, all while missing the most important ingredient: fun escapism. It devolves into another poorly paced fetch quest film, where the characters move from location to location to get one item to lead to another item to lead to another, much the same way that Rise of Skywalker was structured. In fact, one could say Dial of Destiny repeats a lot of the same errors as the Star Wars sequel trilogy under Disney and producer Kathleen Kennedy, and probably that's not a coincidence. The result is the first Indiana Jones movie that I would consider just outright boring. Before watching this, I went back and rewatched all the Indiana Jones films and had such a blast revisiting them. Well, maybe not so much, Crystal Skull, but after this film, I have gained a little bit more of appreciation for it. Because at least it recaptured the spirit of the franchise, even if it got drowned in overblown CGI sequences or questionable creative choices. Dial of Destiny was just a downer in comparison, because the secret ingredient to Indiana Jones is feeling that call to adventure when John Williams' themes strike up those uplifting notes. It's not meant to make you feel tired, sad, old, and depressed. And for me, I felt empty and sad the entire time watching this movie, making me once again think that this series should have been left well enough alone and allowed to ride into the sunset at the end of Last Crusade. But those are just my thoughts on the newest Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. Did you think it was better than the Crystal Skull? Be sure to like and subscribe. Coming up, I have another video on why special effects aren't special anymore, as well as another historical film flashback with Mary Pickford's Poor Little Rich Girl. See you then, and please keep those reels turning. Thank you.